So it looks like everyone is ready. So players are selecting their decks, and we're gonna head into the second semi-final. For those just tuning in, the format of the challenge is every player has to only use rares and epics, but also they have to include at least 5 structures in every single one of their decks. So apparently KingDanzz only has 2 cards. There's the third one, the Volcanic Colossus. We're going to see a mirror match here, and both players are going to have the Axe Grinder opening. Danzz may choose to play Outland Ranger instead and try and get more value with the Axe Grinder. Decides to go the opposite side to Lou, maybe to just try and set up this double collection spot. Chooses not to campfire, so he could have got punished by the Cypher's Wrath, but Lou instead decides that it's more important for him to set up the second collector on the other side.
It's interesting to note that KingDanzz could have responded with an Outcast Tower had he got Cypher's Wrath.
Yeah, so do you think that this is a more aggressive list, or do you think it's a kind of mid-range list that just happens to be running Outcast Tower?
You know, I've tried Outcast Tower in a red control list before, just for those moments when in the in-between times, whenever you're behind on board and you don't want the game to get too far away from you. So I'm a big advocate of Outcast Tower in multiple situations, not just rush decks. So
yeah,
doesn't answer your question.
Really interesting.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to see what this deck's going to bring. It looks like he's going to get the spot next to the well for Axe Grinder. So it looks like he's just going to be playing a kind of, it looks kind of like a mid-range red, which we haven't really seen. Most of the reds we've seen have been more burn variants or control variants.
All right, we have, I forget who it was. It might have been Lou that played. No, he went to both sides the last time too. Lou did against Helios Green White Sack. I remember that. We have seen one player go down the wells with the red.
I think we saw Kanthic do it, but he was also running some yellow in his deck, I think.
Yeah, it was Kanthic versus KingDanzz when KingDanzz was running his blue list.
Yeah, I think Lou's trying to decide between Ground Shaker or... Oh, he doesn't even go for the Ciphers. So, do you think he's saving his Ciphers for something?
Well, with the Outcast Tower on board...
the 3-2 isn't doing
really
that much. Yeah, that's a good point. So he's just trying to conceal the information of what is in his hand. That makes a lot of sense.
So it's kind of interesting that the Outcast Tower slowed the game down enough for KingDanzz to be able to get this aggressive mountain.
So I guess Lou was trying to work out whether or not to go for double prairie, just to deny the Axe Grinder spot. And yeah, I like this play from Danzz as well. Just otherwise, Lou would have been able to draw a card and trade for free into the Axe Grinder, because the effect of the Wandering Monk is it draws a card. Every time you draw a card, the monk gets +1/+0. So he just denies that trade, which is a nice spot from KingDanzz. Could still do it.
Couldn't he still do it though? Yeah, with the Ground Shaker.
Alongside a Ground Shaker, yeah. But it's slightly less efficient. Maybe puts the Ground Shaker in range of something like a Bomb Slinger, if it was put on the same tile, for example.
He could also just trade in ciphers, then follow up with the Bloodwell Sprite, which challenges not only the Outland Ranger.
Yeah. He picks up the Derelict Tower. So it looks like Lou's playing a much more of a burn variant, whereas Dan's is more mid-range. Who do you think is favoured in that sort of matchup?
I would say red mid, if that's what it is, just because he can be the aggressor.
I think in general, yeah, but I think there's quite a lot of fairly decent... I think there's more decent burn cards than mid-range cards available in this format.
Well, Bloodsinger is notably missing, though.
That is true. This is a really nice spot from Lou. So he allows the nice trade into the Wandering Monk, but the Derelict Tower is going to be on hand to mop up that kill. Instead of playing the Ground Shaker, because I guess he wanted to deal with the Outland Ranger while he could, because he was too afraid of a Bomb Slinger just completely wrecking completely swinging the game away from him. The one problem with this Derelict Tower is if he wants to move the Axe Grinder back to defend a little bit more, the Derelict Tower is going to be a little bit in the way. Something that probably won't show up, but it's always something that you have to be thinking about.
Yeah, these structures have been really showing up in this short little meta that we have today in a number of ways.
Yeah, I'm still sad that we didn't see the Weeping Idol.
Right.
But maybe we'll get that. I can still dream that Dan's has at least one in his deck with the Altar of Souls. Back to this play. Ground Shaker seems fairly strong, but you can deal with the 6-1 anyway. I just think it contests the Axe Grinder quite nicely. His alternative play is an Axe Grinder, but that is going to be quite weak against something like a Bomb Slinger or Flame Burst. Whereas if he plays the Ground Shaker, I think he kind of has to trade in the Axe Grinder as well as have some removal from hand. So he chooses to play the Ground Shaker, but he does it in a more defensive position where the Axe Grinder can't reach. So while his Ground Shaker does definitely survive, he does allow his opponent to double collect on this side. So I guess he feels like he has more value in his own deck, so he doesn't mind Dan's collecting as much. He'd rather protect the Ground Shaker, which I can see. I can agree with that. Game connection was lost apparently. Okay, so I'm back in. Did that happen to everyone? Or was that just me?
Yeah, it happened to me. It says it happened to Lou too, so.
So yeah, just seems like everyone got back in okay. So yeah, one of these little hiccups that happens from time to time. So, do you ever want to use the Flame Burst on one of these two collectors, or does it change so little that you just save it and try and get your Axe Grinder in a double collection spot and maybe just block off these lands? Oh, so he's not too... okay, so this way he collects, and he can use the Flame Burst just to protect his Ground Shaker some more.
It's interesting. If he Flame Bursts the Outland Ranger, then he invites the Axe Grinder to be traded into the Ground Shaker. So he doesn't do that. But he does allow the Outland Ranger to have 2 turns of double collecting if he doesn't find another way to take it off the board.
So I guess it depended on how you felt, how likely you feel it is that you'll draw into some additional removal. by the time the Axe Grinder can trade. So we see the
KingDanzz could, yeah, it's a nice 6/6 too. KingDanzz could get a proc on his Volcanic Colossus by campfiring and Cypher's Wrath.
Oh, by using Cyphers first. Yeah, that would have been an interesting play. But I think because he has the King's Faithful in hand now, he might just choose to play that and hope that his opponent... Oh, yeah, he can't because Derelict Tower's there. So Derelict Tower is actually doing a lot of work against red mid-range. Maybe this is something...
even just the threat of it.
Yeah. Maybe this is something that we've learned from this tournament. If you want to counter red mid-range, play some Derelict Tower.
I'm sure nobody's looking for a way to counter red mid-range.
So Danzz decides to play the 7/7 Firebringer, hoping his opponent doesn't have any kind of 1 damage proc or even Flame Burst, Cypher's Wrath. He's going to try and get procs on the Colossus. Interesting to note that Hate Seed isn't actually... Hate Seed's a common card, so it's not available here. Looks like Lou is going to try and counterattack a little bit with the second Axe Grinder here, rather than playing it defensively. So maybe he's just really depending on the Derelict Towers to do a lot of defensive work. Okay, so do you ever use a Flame Burst on one of these towers or not?
That's a good question. I mean, you could save it to see if it might give you more value in a couple turns.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't make a land. He could potentially have played the Colossus last turn. If he made the aggressive lands, he could have moved off and he could have played the Axe Grinder, but he could have maybe played the Colossus. He's got so much Failure, he's probably not too concerned that it costs 7. Does choose to actually Flame Burst the Derelict Tower, so it's doing some work. It got a favorable trade.
He definitely protects his King's Faithful now that the other Derelict Tower is off the board, and he pretty much guaranteed that this one's going to take out the Firebringer.
Yeah. And Lou doesn't really have much in his hand that can kind of counter. So I'm still kind of... The decision to place the Axe Grinder in this aggressive spot almost kind of forces him into, like, you want to now make lands to make use of it, but because of the situation you're in, you can't really do that. So kind of feel like this +1/+1 is a bit irrelevant if it's not able to defend or anything like that.
Is Silent Horsemaster a common card?
It is common, yes. So he can't even... He doesn't have the flexibility to get it back into a defensive position. And now he's got to rely on the Lord of Terror, which is quite weakly statted.
I wondered how defensive-minded KingDanzz was being last turn by not, playing the Colossus. Like you said, he's been holding on to that.
Yeah. So do you think we'll just see an aggressive Firebringer next turn? I mean, Lou has to be worried about big threats, right? He's already seen one Firebringer, so... Ooh. Flame Burst.
It's a nice pickup.
Yeah, that just denies a little bit of Failure, but it's probably not going to be too concerning. He may actually choose to play the Colossus next turn, ahead of the Firebringer.
Well, they're both 8/8s.
Yeah.
Well...
The only difference being the Firebringer can continue to grow. He may even just play Bombslinger, Firebringer, now he's drawn that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And lose completely Fairy Starved. I don't think... Red doesn't have many good ways to deal with 9/9s in the first place.
No.
And, yeah. I struggle to
KingDanzz
see anyway. Yeah.
He's been rewarded for this Firebringer selection. So far, the only person that we've seen do it.
Yeah.
Today.
So, this is interesting to look at. Even when Hate Seed is banned, red mid-range is good. How depressing is that?
Well, between those two and the Cypher's Wrath, he's going to have enough to take care of the Firebringer.
Yeah,
but
I wonder if he's going to prioritize getting the additional Colossus, getting the Colossus down, or just flame bursting the Axe Grinder.
Yeah, I think he flame bursts the Axe Grinder.
Yeah, I agree as well.
Maybe make a mountain?
Yeah, making the mountain makes sense, but drawing also makes a lot of sense. You can make the mountain, or you can make an aggressive mountain next turn if you want to.
Well, not necessarily, but yeah, you're probably right.
Maybe not in the same spot, but if your opponent's making lands, then you're pretty happy at this stage.
Right, right. And you're right, he would have one of those 3 lands there that would be right next to the orb.
So this is kind of the Desperation Bloodwell Sprite. Danzz might go face, so he might even choose to just clear this and then play Colossus.
Yeah, because Lou would be coming up on 4 Fairy if he did.
Yeah,
now 5.
So, Lou can play like +1 and play Ground Shaker here to deal with it. He could also just Ciphers. This is a spot that I don't think Lou is ever coming back from.
No, especially with the ability of red to finish off an opponent when they're low in life.
Yeah, especially with Danzz having both of these Cypher's Wraths in hand.
Right.
It was a good Ground Shaker as well, but it's just not going to be enough for him. And unfortunately, he doesn't have another Derelict Tower for the King's Faithful.
Or a Flame Burst, or a Fireball for 7, rather.
And Lou's trying to decide what the best way to commit Sudoku is. KingDanzz takes that 1-0. So we're going to see... What do you think Danzz will bring next? We've seen all 3 of his decks now, I think. I think he has the blue deck and the GUI sack.
Yeah. I guess the GUI sack?
I think often with Conquest tournaments, the loser, generally the person that loses, or quite often, they will just immediately queue in with the same deck. Sometimes this is a mistake, but Danzz may decide to play the GUI sack deck, which is maybe, the deck that isn't GUI sack, which is maybe
the mono blue,
yeah, which is maybe a bit stronger against a red burn deck. So yeah, that's exactly how things turned out. Lou has a really awesome start here. I would consider, I'd definitely consider keeping all of it. Danzz looks like he's going to throw away the entire hand, and he gets almost the same hand back, swapping the Phantasm for a Sunken Tower. So definitely at this stage, you'd say that Lou's favoured. He even gets the Wandering Monk pickup, which is going to be like means he can collect a turn earlier.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. This is unfortunate. Well, actually, he does get some redeeming quality from the Cistern because he wasn't going to be able to play a farmer until turn 3.
I think it makes sense.
He has to be careful to coincide this cistern with the Wavecrafter. You know.
Yeah.
Make sure his fairy doesn't get away from him.
He might consider just playing Wavecrafter and then unbounding it immediately.
Oh yeah.
Because 8 costs are generally, well, it's the strongest level that you want to unbound something into. It might even be why it's in the deck, so we might see him just do that because he doesn't have many other players. Or he might just draw a card and try and wait a turn, try and find something a little bit nicer to play.
Yeah, he really doesn't need to make a land if he doesn't want to because of the Sunken Tower and the Triton Banquet.
So he's debating whether or not to unbound it. He only loses one area.
No, he loses 4. He loses 4, right?
No,
or does the proc on the
no, this
cistern?
Wavecrafter happens at the end of your opponent's turn, then production happens at the start of your turn. So
okay,
I believe,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that he'll be in a good spot still.
Huh, that's neat. I've never seen that combo before.
No, I'm kind of assuming. But Danzz now has a really good play next turn. Even if Luu's going to move back, I think, or he's considering moving back to play around Banquet. But Danzz actually has the Sunken Tower, so playing around Banquet isn't doing anything. Or he can move back to just play around the Sunken Tower move, of course.
Right.
But yeah, the Banquet's going to be pretty huge for KingDanzz here.
And Lou has to get rid of, he has to dump his Faria too.
So, by doing this, I mean, I think Lou will be pretty happy with the value that he got from the Ground Shaker, changing the Wavecrafter into a favorable trade and also removing 3 Faria from the cistern and a proc from the Sunken Tower.
Yes, that's one productive Ground Shaker.
And now Danzz is going to be wanting to spend up his mana as soon as possible. The only thing that he really has is you can play Banquet plus luuu90 here.
He might consider the Unbound now too.
I think I like playing the Banquet definitely on the Wavecrafter. Just too good a trade to do so. Once you have a 6/6, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, okay. He wants the luuu90 value next turn because his hand, he's running out of cards in his hand.
So this is still a bug. Whenever you use a land movement trick, if you do it too fast, the land stays behind. So the lake is actually underneath the luuu90.
Oh, that's only happening on your stream. That's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. The lake's underneath the luuu90 on my stream.
That's funny.
So yeah, I don't think I like because you've given this jump already. I don't think you need to unbound the Wavecrafter here. So Lou could just play the second Ground Shaker. He might want to get the Axe Grinder in a spot where it can double collect rather than just single collect. The problem is his hand isn't really... It's not really the most impactful in terms of what it's doing on the board. Just playing the Ground Shaker is pretty solid. I wonder if he'll decide to unbound now because he can guarantee that he'll be able to trade into the Ground Shaker favorably. Oh, Egg of Wonders. Wow. Probably not the card that he was looking for, but the artwork is pretty amazing, so I'm sure that'll make up for it.
Yeah, it's nice.
He chooses to unbound. He doesn't give a damn whether or not he gets Beirut. He just goes for it. So that surprises me a little bit.
Yeah, that was risky.
He's happy playing the Ruby Fish in the spot between the wells because he's already seen his opponent has his opponent's already used 2 ground shakers and he didn't have removal last turn, so it's unlikely he'll have it this turn.
So we'll definitely see a draw here from Lou, right?
I presume the Ruby Fish will take a shot from the derelict tower. Yeah, I wonder. So he plays both axe grinders, which allows one to be eaten up by the Scabrian Noble. But other than that, Danzz doesn't have the most failure. I think Lou's not too concerned about Danzz hitting face here because he wouldn't be able to collect.
Yeah, I like that land from KingDanzz because I think out of all the things that Lou did last turn, getting rid of the Ludwan in tandem with the Ruby Fish, of course, was good because it stops the double collecting. But this axe grinder here was just meant to contest, but the land that he made underneath it, more importantly, was setting him up for, you know, a more aggressive land. So I like that KingDanzz responded to that.
Oh, and we're going to see the Egg of Wonders between. I can't wait to see what this ends up giving us. Probably not enough value for the Firestorm here, but maybe he'll just push forward with the axe grinder and just set up the Wandering Monk between the 2 wells. No? Okay.
Yeah, I like that play.
So he's going to get more aggressive with the Wandering Monk, which actually makes a lot of sense because the Monk can get a much higher attack and it's also more... it's got more health, so it's more likely to survive. Oh, it doesn't get the collect. No.
Because
yeah,
I don't know if he would have anyway. I mean, definitely because the wave crash was already there.
Yeah. He wouldn't. I don't think he would have got the collect, but that would have been pretty good. And Battletoads, it's not the sort of thing that Danzz wanted. He might just play something like this just to get it set down, just to have something which is contesting this a little bit, but not really what he's looking for at this stage.
Yeah, he's not in a good spot here. It shows nice patience. The Bomb Slinger's a nice pickup.
Yeah, there's also, well, so you can play Bomb Slinger and Blood Obelisk here if you want. I don't think the Blood Obelisk is particularly impactful in general. It feels more like it's not really a card that is doing a lot in this sort of list. Like with red mid-range, it seems to do a lot more because quite often you are putting so much pressure on your opponent. Whereas with the slower list, you're collecting anyway, so you don't need the extra 1 or 2 failure that Blood Obelisk can give you.
Right.
So maybe it's not exactly worth using it now, but it'll be interesting to see what he chooses. Yeah, it also forces you to make a land, so...
Oh, he was looking at Firestorm plus Derelict Tower, I think.
Oh, yeah. That's something worth considering. I'm not sure you get enough value from your Firestorm.
Yeah,
particularly
I think he was just considering it.
Particularly against blue. You know they're going to be running 3 Battletoads, so I think you want to get at least one of them in your Firestorm.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does Danzz get back into this game?
I was just thinking about that.
It's possible.
I was going to say, Battletoads, one of them can contest the Bomb Slinger. The other one might get turned into a Phantasm.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. I think that's the best way that he can get back into the game. He chooses to prioritize getting the full 5 Mystic Beast. I think he just in general needed more lakes, because when you're playing a card like Battletoads that spawns 2 tokens, quite often you just don't have enough positions, you don't have enough lands to put your creatures on. So maybe he just felt it was worthwhile making the additional lake. But he does kind of, because of that, he does leave this Battletoad, like he leaves this frog to die.
Right.
And this is the benefit to Lou saving the Firestorm before. He gets so much value. I don't see a way that KingDanzz can come back into the game now.
Yeah, he's going to draw and concede probably.
Ludwig Unbound. Just to see. Yeah, I don't think Ursus is doing it. So Lou takes game 2. Both players have made it through, got their red deck through. So we're left with Lou's 2 remaining decks. I don't remember what either of them were. Was Lou also playing a sack deck?
We have seen 2 sack decks. Was it Kanthic or Lou?
I think it was Lou and Danzz that both played sack decks. I could be wrong. And also, Danzz has to get this blue deck through. The blue deck seems pretty solid. The sack deck also looked pretty solid from what we saw before, so be interesting to see what ends up happening. We're just waiting on Bebel to exit the game, and then we can move on to game 3. Maybe we'll get the sack mirror. I can't remember the last time I saw a sack mirror. Oh, it looks like Lou was... Oh, was Lou running the green rush list? I think he was, wasn't he?
Yeah, I know Cappy was.
Yeah, I think Lou was running the green rush list. With Fairy Trees and Overgrown Towers.
I think everybody's had Fairy Tree and Mono Green today.
I think it's one of the few structures that's on the verge of being viable, so that doesn't really surprise me. Danzz chooses to make the land here because he knows his opponent could play Messenger next turn. He doesn't want to give the green rush the chance to step on this land. He wants to force Lou to do everything himself. I think he's going to prioritize getting the Wavecraft out as soon as possible. Just because it's kind of the beefiest creature that he has in his hand. Again, he's ended up with like the double Sunken Tower opening. So really unfortunate second game in a row for KingDanzz.
And we saw it happen to Capu once or twice too.
Yeah, with all these structures in the deck, you're so much more likely to get a really dodgy draw. And Danzz just decides to play both of his Sunken Towers. not doing the same as Helios and trying to disguise the strength of his hand. Just says, I'm going to put these on board and you're going to have to deal with at least one of them, and then I'm going to mess you around. Interesting that Lu... Oh, we didn't have the mana for Fairy Tree, right? No. So I think we might see Fairy Tree come out this turn. And maybe just... we might just take out one of these towers. I think they're more threatening than Ludwan at the moment. Because if you're a rush deck and you don't get the aggressive lands that you need... Okay, so he chooses to focus more on the Ludwan. So what I was thinking was maybe you play these lands, and then you can take this out, and then you can set up King's Faithful here to contest the Ludwan. If you think that Ludwan is that much of a threat. However, this way he does block Dan's ability to use these sunken towers to move off for double collecting. So there's definitely a lot of merit to the play that Lude made there. I can definitely see Dan's using these towers to just, yeah. And
he did.
I think not actually making, not actually killing the towers might turn out to be really good for KingDanzz, because they can get a lot of value against this sort of list.
Speaking of value, that actually might not be too bad against blue.
Yeah, but Danzz has got a play now where he moves Ludwan onto the tile above the Wavecrafter and then pushes it up twice, trades with the King's Faithful, and then Wavecrafter trades into the Arena's Messenger.
And he gets a proc.
And he can play Gabriel Noble as well to get the Ruby Fish set up on the left-hand side, where it's going to farm a lot of Faeria for a long time. Also interesting to note that it doesn't look like Lu has got the Outcasts, what are they called? Outcast Towers in his deck, because he's playing Overgrown Towers and Fairy Trees. And he gets the Prophet of Tides as well.
Yeah,
so
those Outcast Towers are really nice versus blue.
Yeah, so this decision to actually...
Yeah, he could use that for the Wavecrafter.
Yeah, the decision to leave the Sunken Tower up is going to be really punishing for Lu here, I think.
Blue is the Wavecraft at this point. I mean, he's got 3 more Fairy than he would have had, enough to play a Veteran Force. Or Outland Ranger and Possessed Ursus, perhaps.
Yeah, the Possessed Ursus. Maybe the Possessed Ursus is the best way that Lu's got of getting back into the game. Is there any way that... Danzz can actually use the Prophet of Tides to, once he trades in for the... Oh, do you think he takes out the Fairy Tree, or do you think he hits into the Ursus? I think taking out the Fairy Tree might be... It's probably Lu's best way back into the game, so I think you really prioritize taking out the Fairy Tree.
Well, I guess either way, one of those creatures are going to die next turn before the Wave Crash was played anyway.
And yeah, with that Fairy Tree dying, I think Lu's last chance is something like a Vajoran Force, or maybe maybe a King's Faithful defensively, but once these threats are just kind of eaten up, then I'm really struggling to see anyway that Danzz loses this game. He might even want to find a way to kill off his Wavecrafter, just to stop giving luuu90 now.
Yeah, all this land movement here at the bottom of the screen you see is definitely allowed KingDanzz to not only stabilize by getting rid of that King's Faithful as a threat earlier in the game, but it's allowed him to turn the tables as quickly as you used to with Windborn Champion once you stabilize versus Rush, for an example.
Yeah.
And not to mention the fish. You know, he's all over the board this game, just collecting from 4 wells on top of Wavecrafter. It's really kind of been neat.
Battletoads is just gonna exacerbate that. So I think we'll see Danzz hit the the Colossus into the Ursus, and then trade off the Wavecrafter, just because it's not really doing that much of a job for him anymore. Apparently not.
Yeah,
I think it's better now for Lou than it is for Danzz. Lou concedes anyway, so Danzz is gonna move back into the lead, go 2-1 up, and he just needs to get a win with his sack deck now, which I'm really looking forward to seeing a bit more of.
So Lou probably has blue, right?
I think blue stands a lot more of a chance against the sack deck, but he knows that he has to win with both of them, so maybe he's just going to keep the same deck. No, he's going to try and... maybe he's deciding that he's going to use this as an opportunity to play the more favoured deck and try and learn as much about his opponent's deck as possible, so he has the best chance with his mono green list. So, not the best start for KingDanzz. Lou does have a bit of a clunky start as well, but he has the Gabriel system, which might end up being very valuable this game, because Sack isn't... Without Wind Soldier, Sack isn't really able to deal with the system in the early turns. So, I think just playing Triton Chef and Gabriel System would be quite a nice play here. And I like...
we talked about that before the tournament started today. If there was, how many Wind Soldiers or Fire Bombs would be able to take out the Cistern.
Yeah. He decides not to play the Triton Chef this turn, which surprises me a little bit. But I guess he just wants to get this Sunken Tower out as soon as possible. The only problem I have with this is if he ever wants to drop a minion, he has to make a new land for it right now, if he wants to do it in the next couple of turns. Particularly with him having Phantasm in his hand. He's going to have 2 lands for that to actually use that. Wow, he's considering going aggressive here. I guess because he knows that he's on a bit of a clock, and he has the Colossus in hand. Why do you think he's made these aggressive lands? Maybe just the fact that he has no collectors. He decided, well, I'm not going to have anything collecting anyway, so I may as well make the aggressive lands, and then I can start making lands for collecting when I draw something.
I think you're exactly right, because, you know, that's the difference between Red Rush of old and Red Mid, is that Red Mid started going up the sides, and essentially they're the same deck in a lot of ways anyway.
Yeah. So, kind of, I think he wanted to play like the Triton Chef and the Mirror Phantasm that turn, but he didn't have the lands to do that aggressively.
I agree.
However, this, I'm sure he's also considering the fact that this keeps the Triton Chef hidden, and he should have the Farrier to do it the next turn anyway. So this cistern's actually getting a lot of value. And now this is a really good strategy against Zach, because as we talked about earlier, you are on a clock. If we talk a bit about Danz's hand, he has picked up the Grave Guardian and Bloom Sprites, but he's still looking for some way to sacrifice, particularly the Bloom Sprite or the other 1/1 Royal Judge. So do you think he's gonna draw here, or do you think he'll just... He can't play the Grave Guardian because he only has one forest. So it feels like he needs...
I think you need to make a forest. That's what I was going to say.
Because they contest the 5/5 so much. But if you go down that strategy, and it works, like, if you go down that strategy and they have Banquet, which Lou does, then it might not be so great. It looks like he's just going to flood the board as much as possible and just hope that something sticks, so when he draws a creature that sacks something, he'll have something left to actually sack, which makes a lot of sense. Fortunately, Lou picks up a Real Judge, and I think he'll just use it and then unbound. When I play as Sack, against Sack, I really prioritize killing as many of my opponent's little Sack minions as possible, so that they do get these really clunky hands where they have all kind of like all Deathwalkers and Shaitan Assassins and stuff like that.
It's similar to playing blue in that sense.
Yeah.
You want to keep the tokens off the board.
Yeah, so I really like, if he chooses to just play Punishment on the Royal Judge, I really like this play. I mean, he does have to think about Soul Eater coming out next turn, but if he's been keeping track, which as great a player as Lou is, I'm sure he has been, he probably knows it's still a baby at the moment, so he can afford to kill off this Real Judge and then unbound his own.
Well, maybe the unbound is what he's considering not doing, because of the Soul Eater, but obviously if you play the Royal Judge there, you want to unbound it.
Yeah, and that's a bit of an awkward unbound for him, for now, because if he got a non-ranged creature, then he would have been able to attack with all three next turn, due to Banquet. Banquet's going to come up really big here, just to deal with the Grave Guardian. Danzz is doing what he can to stay in this game. This Sagami Warrior is going to trade quite nicely with the Mirror Phantasm. Unfortunately, he does have the Banquet. Oh wow, looks like he's just choosing to go aggressive.
Okay, I thought he was going to use the Sunken Tower to move the Sagami in range of the range.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that would make some sense as well. But he chooses to just focus on face. I'm not sure if I really like this play. I think the Banquet just matches up so perfectly with the 5/6. And also I don't know if you want to be... Maybe just, you're setting up this pretty big clock. So you're okay with it, but
Yeah, if he's done his math, he knows that 5+4 plus the Triton Banquet is lethal next turn.
Yeah, that's true. But Dan's can't even block with the Cartographer because of the Siege Engine can trade it. So yeah, I guess he has to block with the Soul Eater, but the Soul Eater's only a 4/4 still. Dan still has Explore in his hand. So he actually has access to Last Nightmare with the Explore. He might just do that. I think it's his best chance.
Okay, so he was just looking at whether to use the Grove Guardian north or south.
Yeah.
Before he Last Nightmares, I think. You're probably right about that.
Yeah, this way, Luke can't just block on one land. He has to block on both. Yeah, and he chooses to Last Nightmare this one because it's a better defensive position to have. So the Mystic Beast can't just jump onto the land the Sagami Warrior is on, and then something else can be played on this collecting spot.
Another Royal Judge pickup. I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah, so do you want to use the Royal Judge, or do you want to just use the Banquet, or do you want to use neither? I mean, Luke kind of went all in already, so maybe he's just gonna Yeah, I guess this makes sense. Is there any way that Danzz can stop this now?
No, he has to draw. Or
yeah, he can't block with the Soul Eater here. Yeah, struggling to see anything that can be done. Punishment was only one away from dealing with Siege Engine last turn. I guess he just has to block with Soul Eater. Just play the Soul Eater here and hope his opponent doesn't have a way of dealing with a 5/5. I think this is just game, but oh yeah, I guess there's no real need to put it. There's no real need to put it right in front of your orb, but putting it in line of the Siege Engine does mean that, along with a Royal Judge, it's going to get dealt with. So yeah, it looks like moving the Grove Guardian up was a really heads-up play by Lou, because not only did it just take the Grove Guardian out of the game, Danzz actually had no way of getting it to die, which kept the level of the Soul Eater quite low. So it might have stood more chance of surviving if he could have got one or two more procs on it.
Another interesting note about that Grove Guardian play is I said before he played the Last Nightmare, I said KingDanzz was deciding whether to use the Grove Guardian offensively or defensively.
Yeah.
And he went and took up the sunken tower. Had he not taken out the sunken tower and moved defensively, Lou could have just moved it back anyway. So it was a win. It was a win-win situation for Lou.
So he's gonna play Safeguard on. Okay. But he should know that there is a punishment in Dan's hand if he was paying attention, but I don't think it's going to make any difference whatsoever. Really nice that he plays the real judge on this tile. So I think that was the reason why he played the judge. Getting it on this tile now just means that if Danz wants to block the siege engine attack, he also has to kill the judge somehow. So there's no way of killing or stopping everything that I can see. So yeah, Lou is gonna take the 4th game, and we're gonna go down to a final game, and it's gonna be Green Yellow Sack versus Green Rush. How do you think this is gonna go?
Green Rush is a bit.
I think we're losing Fro Daddy a bit here. Personally, I'm really interested to see whether... Generally, I feel like Green Yellow Sack is pretty favored against Green Rush. Like 70%. But in this format, there's no access to Bone Collectors or Elderwood Hermits. Which are kind of 2 of the strongest cards in that matchup. Additionally, what I would like to see is if Danz can set up his Altar of Souls to be really... it could be really key in this matchup. Oh, it looks like Lou is running Outcast Tower in his green deck. So maybe 2 of each of the 3... structures, 2 Overgrown Towers, 2 Outcast Towers, and 2 Fairy Trees. So yeah, I was wondering whether Danz would think about keeping the Altar of Souls. Maybe it's a bit too greedy in the mulligan, but it could definitely be one of the cards that is strongest in this matchup, because green has no real efficient way to deal with it. Grove Guardian is going to be a really strong card. In the first few turns, unfortunately, Danz chose to play a desert instead of a forest, which makes a lot of sense because he already has a forest on this side. And when you play 2-color decks, you generally want 1 of each land on either side. But on this occasion, he will really be wishing that he played a green, so that he could play the Grove Guardian next turn.
Hey, there's our aforementioned Tethra.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Ruina's Messenger draws Tethra for luuu90. And do you think that will make any kind of a splash in this deck? Or do you think it's... going to be too slow? KingDanzz isn't running, obviously, the Wavecrafter in this deck, so it might be a little bit too slow to ever see play. But it looks like Lou is just completely taking over this game. Danzz doesn't, well, he can play the Grove Guardian still, but it's not going to be in a position where it can taunt up this Ruina's Messenger. And if Lou plays the Vajoran Force, it's not even a particularly good trade. I guess the one thing that Danzz could possibly do here is play Explore and then play Grove Guardian and Royal Judge. But again, this is a really nice land position by Lou. A lot of players would just put the the forest on this tile. But by doing this, he just completely denies any spot for Grave Guardian. And he's seeing that Danzz is probably running Grave Guardian. So this now is a bit of a substandard spot for it, because he doesn't get to tie up this Ruinous Messenger and deny the face hit. So Danzz actually just plays both Grave Guardians, which is a lot better than the play I suggested. The Grave Guardian, by making this land as well, Danzz can set up the Royal Judge to double collect down between these two wells after trade, and use the punish to finish off the 7/7, and then come back and trade into the 3/4. Unfortunately, Lu isn't going to allow him to do this, blocking with the King's Faithful, which still will get tied up and will be a little annoying for KingDanzz. I think he'll still use the Royal Judge just to kill off the 7/2, because it's a very big threat right now, but it's difficult to see how he gets back into this game, especially with the last two cards that he drew being Ultra of Souls.
Yeah, he's running out of options.
This is actually really nice positioning by Danzz. So the Judge is going to be able to trade into the King's Faithful next turn to finish it off, unless Lu finds some other way of dealing with it. I'm not sure if he'll be too happy with the Everbloom Wisp, but he can play Everbloom Wisp and Therium Golem just to keep the pressure up. And Forest just to keep the pressure up to to start getting nearer to the 5 mountains he needs for that 3 Failure Therium Golem, which is going to be massive. Also, if he draws feed at any time, then he can play Therium Golem, feed it, and then probably have the Failure to play Tethra. So this is probably what he's thinking about. I think one of the reasons that we're seeing quite a bit of green is because feed is one of the strongest cards that green has. With that being a rare, it's available in this format. It just pumps up how strong the deck is. And Danzz doesn't seem happy with his Grave Guardian draw.
Yeah, we've seen him do that before. Whenever he was able to play in Aurora's Dream, he was excited about it. I guess he's excited in the negative way right now. But I see Lu just piling up option after option after option, plan B on plan C, setting up plays for 2 or 3 turns from now. And Lu,
I wonder if Lu is going to start thinking about collecting once he takes out this the 5/4. If he's just going to go full face and just try to race because he knows Soul Eaters are coming, or if he'll try to set up something like an Outcast Tower between the wells to kind of double collect and just like be able to play a threat every turn rather than a threat every 2 turns.
Well, it's unfortunate he can't. He could. Well, okay. I was looking at both being able to bring his opponent down to below 10 to proc the Waryak.
Oh, yeah.
If he was able to use a campfire, so he's not able to do both this turn. Although I like it. Yeah, go ahead.
Interesting that he decides to go for the Grave Guardian rather than set up, rather than hit into the orb and then gain a Failure and play Waryak. I guess the Guardian has a little bit more health and he's probably worried about... maybe he's worried about a Grave Guardian from his opponent, and he thinks if his opponent does that, then he can play Outland Ranger and use the Campfire on his Guardian to get a really fantastic trade.
There you go. So we've seen, well, all these players really today making some, but Lou especially in this series, making some very subtle moves and non-moves.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing about Faria. Every single like micro decision that you have to make is important, and just one can lose you the game. I think that's particularly the case in this sort of format because you haven't played with the decks before, so you don't really have so much familiarity with situations that come up frequently. So it's a lot more skill to be able to see it the first time that it's happened than to miss a play and then you learn and then you play it again. It just shows how great a player these guys are, with how well we've seen them play today, despite having never played with the decks before.
Runin's Command is a nice pickup here to counter the pumped up Grove Guardian.
Yeah, maybe it's unfortunate he doesn't have enough area for the Runin Shrine next turn. If he did, I think he'd be in a good position. And yeah, this is really not the kind of hand that Danzz was looking for. And it goes back to what we were saying. When you have to play 5 structures in your deck, and then you also play 3 cards that require 6 lands, that can leave you with really clunky hands. And I think the most successful people have been those that have stuck with mono-colored decks throughout. I believe both Thormund and Lou are playing 3 monocolored decks. I don't want to count KingDanzz out even at this stage, but it does look like Lou's going to be taking this one. So that's something interesting. Maybe next time round we force all players to bring 3 2-color decks or more.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a lot more knowledge about this type of format. But you see, the Runin's Messenger's been here since turn 2, right? Or turn 1 with the Explorer?
And Danzz is really frustrated he didn't find the Shaitan Assassin a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for him, that is going to be game. And Lou is going to take this one 3-2. Really tight game. Or really tight match full of really tight games. So that was a really exceptional series to watch.